The end of the summer transfer window has not stopped the rumors around Aston Villa striker Jhon Duran, who had a lot of interest this summer, but Aston Villa managed to hold on to him. And I think that was best for both the player and the club. We're going to talk about why that was next on Soccer Wonder Kids at the Pitchside Pub. So of course everybody wants Jhon Duran. He's 20 years old, he's a dynamic talent, a little enigmatic, and some issues maybe off the field or in the dressing room, but some of those are unsubstantiated. What he does is he puts the ball in the goal, and we saw that in the first game of the Premier League season when he came on as a substitute and scored what ultimately ended up being the game-winning goal for Aston Villa. And so even though the transfer window is done, there are still reports and links out there of tons of clubs interested in his services, which is to be expected. One report, however, just coming out suggested that Aston Villa turned down upwards of 40 offers for Duran this summer, some which we hadn't even heard of. And I think that was the best thing that could have possibly happened for both the club and the player. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and finding a good situation and staying in it. That's the real theme today, because that's what happened, and I hope for both player and club it continues to happen at least through the end of this year. But before we get too deep down that rabbit hole, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel. Get in that comment section. What do you think? Should he have gone elsewhere? Was he ready? To what club? What's the good situation? Would you want him at your club? Get in that comment section. Let me know your thoughts. You can also leave comments on Twitter at Pitchside Pub, and check out the website pitchsidepub.com. So the strongest links were to West Ham, and there was like the social media thing where he did the hammer, and then of course he goes off and scores against them in game one for the winner. And you know, sometimes these storylines are just fun. Sorry, West Ham fans, I'm not laughing at your expense. It's just sometimes it's interesting how these things play out. But at the end of the day, at the end of the transfer window, really more importantly, Jhon Duran is still an Aston Villa player. And that's really good for him, and it's really good for the club. For a club like Aston Villa, who has aspirations of maybe not winning the league, but of repeating at least that top four finish that they had last year, and more importantly, has to figure out how to do it while now competing on four fronts. They are in the Champions League, and that is a daunting task. And we have seen this happen before, most recently Newcastle, who got a top four finish and then did not have the roster depth to really handle it the following season, and it hurt them across the board. In addition to not doing particularly well in the Champions League, it hurt them in the Premier League because they tried to be, good on too many fronts, and they were stretched too thin, and they didn't have the roster depth to do it. So a team in Aston Villa's situation needs, obviously, depth, and they did go out and get a number of players. They had a busy offseason, but you need it at specific positions, and you're going to have to rotate even at striker. Ollie Watkins is 28, and he cannot play every single game in the Premier League and the Champions League and two domestic cups, and this is why it's especially hard in England, because you've got that second domestic cup. And so what happens is these clubs like Villa now have to compete in Europe. They're probably going to write off at least the Carabao Cup, if not the FA Cup as well. But writing it off means different things depending on your depth, and that's where a player like Jhon Duran is so valuable, because you're not exactly writing things off when you start him for a game. When you are in those early rounds of both cup tournaments, you can start Jhon Duran and your team is still really good because he's a really good player. Now, do really good players want to spend the season being a backup? Well, no, not in a nutshell, but when they're 20 years old, that's not necessarily the worst thing. I am constantly arguing that young players need to play for their development, and that is true. That can't just be done blindly, though. There is the possibility of being overexposed at too young of an age. Just playing for the sake of playing isn't necessarily good, especially if you're out there getting your butt walloped every game and you're not effective and you're not getting service from your teammates and you're not having success. It has destroyed some careers. So it's not like Jhon Duran could have been sent to Tottenham instead of Dominic Solanke and would have been the answer. Is he ready for that? Well, I don't know. I guess we would have found out, but that seems like it would have been a very aggressive approach and a stretch. West Ham, he would have worked in, but he would have been probably the guy. Maybe that's too big of a jump for him right off the bat. So there is the possibility of a player's career getting torpedoed by getting overexposed. So a player at 20 being a backup to a player like Ollie Watkins is no shame, And on a team like Aston Villa is the perfect situation because they have more than enough competitions to go around. If he was a backup on a club that didn't have European football, and he was and they might go out early in the Carabao Cup, and all of a sudden they're playing once a week, yeah, maybe there aren't enough games to go around because you're going to start Ollie Watkins every week if you only have one game a week. But that's not going to be Villa's case. They're guaranteed 8 Champions League games. Duran will probably get a run in the Carabao Cup, maybe the early part of the FA Cup, depending on how the schedules fall. He's going to get plenty of games. And that's a good thing for him. He can have his success. He's going to come in as a sub in Premier League games, just like he did in the first match week of the season. And then this whole decision can be kicked down the road while everyone gets exactly what they want. Duran is going to play, maybe not every game, but he's going to play enough, make a big name for himself. If he takes advantage of opportunities like he did in week 1, oh my gosh, that transfer fee is going to double because he's still young and talented. And so he's going to get to play, but he's also going to get that protection. Unai Emery can pick and choose his spots. He can make sure that he's putting him in against competition where he can be successful. He can sort of nurture him rather than throw him into the mix. And then should something happen to Ollie Watkins, he is good enough to step in and not have that big of a drop-off. Let's face it, at this point, Jhon Duran is one of the better backup strikers in the Premier League. And so this is a perfect situation for him. It's also perfect for Villa. You need that depth, but it's not like they're going to go out and get a striker more talented than Jhon Duran, maybe more experienced, but not more talented, because nobody that's more talented is going to want to come be the backup to Ollie Watkins. And that's the tough part that the bigger clubs have to face, and why developing your own young talent is so important, because who wants to come back up Kevin De Bruyne? Who wants to come back up William Saliba? Who wants to come back up Declan Rice at these big clubs? These guys that are going to play almost every single day. Well, nobody that's a veteran, nobody that's really talented, but you know who will? Young, talented players who just need to get their feet wet and cut their teeth a little bit, right? So that's why Manchester City doesn't have a backup for Rodri, because he plays every game, so they're going to rely on youth, because they can't get a competent backup, because any competent backup is going to want to play. It's, Calvin Phillips, he was a disaster, but even if he was good, he wasn't going to unseat Rodri, right? So it wasn't going to happen. So you have to rely on youth, and that's what Jhon Duran is. He is as talented a young striker as you're going to find, and you've already got him. And so when you want to deploy him, he's really good, but he also doesn't have, or shouldn't have, that expectation of playing every single day. And that's probably the disconnect. He was sort of pushing his way up because he did have that expectation, but someone in his camp needs to get a hold of him and say, hey, maybe this isn't the worst thing for you, pal, right? You're still going to get 20, 30 appearances. You'll get 10, 15 starts. You'll get, 1,200, 1,500 minutes. He'll probably get, a little bit of Champions League exposure. Certainly gets to be a part of it. He'll play a little, I'm sure, in some of those matches as they rotate in. That's a good situation for him. And then next summer, we can reevaluate that. And maybe he's had a great season in his part-time play, and the fees for him are now upwards of like 60 million instead of 40 million, and Villa can cash in. Or maybe Ollie Watkins has another good season, and at 29 they say, now is the time to cash in on you. We've got this dynamite guy waiting in the wings, and they sell Ollie Watkins for some massive sum, as they were linked to do this summer. And now they've got his replacement in-house already. So a lot of options that nobody needs to decide right now. But I really think if you're trying to figure out, where is the best spot for Jhon Duran, competitive club, possible Champions League exposure, some playing time, but maybe not full-time playing time, don't overexpose him, good manager. I mean, you're describing the club where he already is. So I'm usually rooting for young players to make a move to someplace where they can get a lot of playing time, but in his case, I think he is at the absolute perfect spot in terms of manager, style of play, roster construction, opportunities in Europe, and all of the possibilities, playing time, everything that goes into is a player in a good spot. I cannot think of a better spot for Jhon Duran than exactly where he is. So I'm thrilled that he did not get transferred just for his development's sake. I hope they don't force a January transfer. I hope he gets enough playing time to be happy and start to develop and realize, okay, maybe I dodged a bullet. throwing a hissy fit and trying to get out of here all summer. Maybe this was the best place for me after all, and his development continues, and then we can reevaluate this next summer. That's what I'm hoping for. But I'd love to get your comments. Get down in that comment section. Let me know your thoughts. While you're at it, you can leave some comments on Twitter at PitchsidePub. Make sure you hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel, and check out the website, pitchsidepub.com. Thanks as always for joining us here on Soccer Wonder Kids at the Pitchside Pub.